everybody, this is Chloe Hudson. Thank you so much for joining me. So I just want to make a quick note. I apologize for not being more present with you guys lately. I've got a lot of changes happening in my life. And I've also come to finally ground the decision that I'm going to start pulling away from YT. I have already given up Insta and FB a while ago, and at this point I'm watching the platform and the way in which the Borg tries to siphon your energetics out of YT so thoroughly that I'm going to start utilizing Bitchute and Rumble as my primary video platform. That way I can say whatever I want. I have so much to talk to you guys about. I have so many things I want to share on such a more expansive, extreme, or controversial level that I'm done with filtering my words, right? So this will be my last video where I watch what I say. And in the future, I will just post an intro video here if the content isn't acceptable for YT and let you know that there's a new full-length video up on one of those platforms. Okay, so today I want to talk about the insectoids. These little guys have really been annoying me lately, and I've got a lot of beef with them right now. So I want to vent and tell you some stories. And first, I guess, for anybody who's going to click off, let me just address the underworld portal that's opening for Halloween, right? It happens every year. We invoke it, we dress up for it. So just take care this year, of course, to protect yourself from any unwelcome beings, creatures, entities, what have you, that'll be navigating in and out of these portals. So I would suggest using some physical anointing for the evening, and also holding your wits about you when anoint your body physically with like frankincense oil. There is actual anointing oil, myrrh, what works for you. Just be aware that sage is fairly etheric, so it doesn't really get the job done in regard to the physical. Okay, Palo Santo is more grounded, so a combination is lovely. Also, when you're out and about and playing and enjoying and viewing the costumes and things like this, just have your mental revocations and protections around you, because certain costumes and certain symbols or things that people are holding, such as if you're a devil and you're holding the pitchfork, these are access points into the underworld and other realms. So you want to protect from any default connections or tethers into these spaces that you really aren't wanting to engage with, right? And it's just all about having a strong will. This is a time where our realm coalesces with their realm, and you can hold your boundaries and ensure you stay safe if you know that this is happening and how to address it inside your being. Okay, so the insectoids. Now these guys, I've had a lot of experiences with these guys over the years, and there's a ton of different types of insectoids. And like I've said in the past, when I've talked about parasites, for example, one major way that the controllers or the handlers or the programmers like to attack, especially when you're starting to realize that this stuff's been happening to you, there's kind of like this default plan B that was placed into your body or your field long ago for if it ever came to this. But once you get to a point where you start revealing often an experience of different types of parasites or invaders on the physical, so physical parasites, whether this is endo or exo parasites, they start invading or becoming active in your body. You start to realize you're having some kind of infestation and you need to clear that out. Well, when you physically clear that out, it also works very thoroughly to etherically clear it out, right? So a wonderful way to address these types of infestations and invaders is to do it on the physical, the mundane, the practical. So it's the same right now when we think about the insectoids. There's so much going on around right now with the jab and the health of the blood and the nano and all of this stuff, right? It's coming into our body. How do we protect from it? It's the same thing. Think about these insectoid invaders, right? This is happening etherically as well as physically. So how do we cleanse and clear and purify this out of our bodies and out of our etheric bodies, out of our psychic body, out of our consciousness, right? Well, one wonderful way to do it that has had a lot of controversy, which was very particularly placed around false info, is distilled water, right? I'm just learning about this. One of my clients has turned me on to this. Study this topic. Distilled water is fantastic. It cleans everything. Your body is a machine. Clean your machine. And you'll see a lot of false info about it around the demineralization. And distilled water is often only found in places where you would buy cleaning products or in the automotive section. There's a reason for that. Nature distills water in its own, right? Our body needs to be purified. Anyhow, so getting back to the insectoids. Okay, so I was watching somebody's YouTube the other day, and she's talking about how this is Florbrun. I don't watch her a lot, you know, and I take it all with a grain of salt, of course, but she hits on some really intriguing notes sometimes. She was real upset in talking about how she's registered that, you know, what's happening with the jab, it's an insectoid invasion inside the body. She was specifically talking about the arachnid, right? And the invasion, the infestation it's taking within the blood and within the body itself, right? Now, a couple months ago, I talked about the black spiders that a lot of us have experienced, and we're seeing more and more right now because the fields are becoming more prevalent with them, and there's more access to sight right now too. So, you know, they've been on my periphery. They've really been annoying me because I have a big beef with their agenda and their MO. Okay, so think like shadow China right now, like all of these really, you know, sketchy, experimental, shady, toxic invasion type things that we're getting from that side of the world. That's insectoid territory, right? So that's the type of frequency signature we're looking at, okay? So the insectoids love to experiment. They love to study. They have their own agenda. They have no empathy for your pain threshold. And they really want to understand how things tick, right? So they're the type that it's not necessarily maliciously intended as, you know, Saturnian or satanic experiments might be. You know, if they're doing from my experience, if they're doing an experiment on something or someone that is intentionally inducing pain, it's not because they want the person to suffer. It's more about, you know, what's happening chemically or mechanically or neurologically with this, right? The suffering is just a happenstance that they really don't care about. So that's kind of a different intent in regard to how the satanic realm might make somebody suffer through an experiment. Suffering is to suffer for the satanic. For, you know, the insectoid, it's more of like a byproduct. Okay, so so Florbrun was talking about how the insectoids are taking over the blood. So what's happening, and we've seen with the microscopy, if you've been watching any of this, what's happening with people with the jab at this point is entities are forming inside the blood. There's actually little critters coming together inside and coagulating and having an internal invasion in a way that's unprecedented, right? Now, insectoids have long been doing lots of experiments. I've had a lot of interaction with the mantids over the, you know, the years, a lot of different ant type beings, and by no means are they all negative, but everyone is trying to meet needs and figure something out, right? Try to get their agenda fulfilled. And a big one in the insectoids is how to reinstate their claim and how to make sure they have access to, you know, spirit or the quantum energies that they've kind of cut themselves off from. How do they proliferate their lifespan in a way that's sustainable? Humans have the ability to do this, so they study us like crazy, right? They also know how to manipulate the different frequency realms and ways of interacting, communicating that we just don't, because we're like infants when it comes to our abilities to access the psychic realms and know what's what. So they play with this too. So I just did a session with a client who was doing the session on behalf of her daughter. When her daughter, who is now 7.5, was 4 months old, her daughter got meningitis. Okay. And I remember them talking about this to me because we work together often. And it made me think about how I didn't know this from my mom, but I went back and did a session a few months ago, and I found that as an infant, I had encephalitis for a period of time, which I found really intriguing because I connect psychic attack and experiences in the interim between spirit and physical realm happening when these infants are getting these types of brain swelling and serious complications and dis-ease. When infants are getting certain serious illnesses, I often correlate that to what's happening with them, their battle, or their struggles when it comes to them moving back through spirit realm into the physicality, because they're still really utilizing a thin veil. So anyhow, so it comes back around months later and they say, hey, I want to look at her meningitis. What happened and what do we need to clear? Well, do the session, and basically I get to a point. Now this is going to sound pretty radical unless you guys are used to accessing your aspects and your other timelines and all this stuff. And if you do access this, you might really relate. So basically I start to register, and I have to study. I'm not clear. What is meningitis? Okay, so it's an inflammation of the meninges, which is a more shallow layer that covers your brain for protection, right? So it's an inflammation of that layer of the brain collagen and the spinal cord, right? It accesses the cerebral spinal fluid, which I've talked about a lot in courses. Your CSF is, in my opinion, your direct link to spirit. The fluid that restores and rejuvenates runs all the way up to the top of your brain, down to your perineum, and it cleanses and keeps you connected to spirit and cycling your energy, right? And it's charged. It runs your electromagnetic fluid, or excuse me, an electromagnetic frequency. So, meningitis is an inflammation and an attack. Hers was bacterial. Hers was Guillain-Barré syndrome. So it speaks to the frequency signature of the attack, right? So that's like a staph infection, basically. So we've got these bacteria, these invasions inside the body, affecting the part of a 4-month-old formation of basically how they regulate spirit and matter, okay? And then what lit up in her was parts of her brain, we're muscle testing, parts of her brain that are basically forming her pituitary, her connection to spirit. And so I start researching the different layers of the brain, and we find arachnoid matter that I've never heard of, right? Which is very interesting to me. And then as I'm starting to wrap up session, the little girl's spirit comes in and tells me, she says, she taps me basically. She taps me and points over there. And I look over there and I see a scene where it's basically a giant roach-like insectoid behind a human, which she's telling me is her. And there's like tubing coming out of the head. So there's still studies and experiments going on. And I'm like, okay, what realm is this in? Is this another timeline? No. Okay, so this is another realm. This is another dimensionality. I need to find the frequency of that realm. So I'm trying to figure out what frequency plane we're on here, right? And then she helps me suss that out. And so basically I'm finding the frequency on that plane of the CSF. So the way in which we are connected to spirit, they're accessing that level of where they're, capturing this part of her consciousness and doing these testings. And I say, okay, how come they're here? What's going on? And basically, here's I say this is the interesting part. You just want to thought the giant insectoid is the interesting part, but she tells me basically, which I totally relate to. I've got aspects like this, that one of her aspects, what she says, let me read it to you verbatim, actually. She said to me, The subdural plane represents the outskirts of space where a lot of bartering happens. I got involved with the wrong group and couldn't fulfill an order. I got cocky. Okay, so I had to look that up. What's subdural, right? So subdural is just below the, it's like just below the meninge dura mater, right? So she's saying micro to macro, this part of our brain space is affiliated with, you know, this part of outer space, right? And if any of you guys have watched the movie Serenity or the series Firefly, it's just like that. Some of our aspects that are space travelers, you know, to make sure we have our own provisions, we start working the trades. We say, hey, I'll get this item for you. I'm going to sell it to this grouping, whatever, delivery, payment, bam. That's how we navigate those realms for those aspects that live in that experience. You know, it's can be a good, honest job, but you got to watch out. You can get looped into the wrong crew, right? So anyway, she tells me that that aspect of hers makes an agreement, gets cocky, can't fulfill the order, and the insectoids and their payback, they're like, okay, we're going to come in now. We're going to start experimenting with you because you didn't fulfill this agreement. Okay, so anyway, and it's interesting because they're studying that level of brain because they want access to spirit quantum frequency. So they can hopefully find a way in which they can connect up with, because they're on limited supply, right? Humans, if we're still connected to our spirit, we have this forever unlimited supply of our spirit, of our quantum, right? And interestingly enough, what was said, or, you know, when I'm breaking these agreements and making sure that we're done here, you're no longer allowed to access this aspect, you know, you've way overstepped in this agreement, is what I'm seeing is first they tried to synthetically create the cerebral spinal fluid, which doesn't work. And then they tried to harvest the cerebral spinal fluid and connect it up to their beings and entities, which isn't working. So they're trying all these different ways, right? How do they access spirit so they can rejuvenate their energetics? So anyhow, end these agreements, get them out of the way. But, you know, the moral of the story here is watch out who you're bartering with in space, but also keep your wits about you now. There's a huge insectoid invasion, and they really don't even have to hide anymore because they can stake their claim. Because so many of these other human factions that we see that are asinine and making rules and controlling, they are basically saying, here you go, here's your free-for-all, you now have permission. And the insectoids, just like the Borg, utilize the AI and work hand in hand, whether they're authoritative or they're having a minion role, because they have different agendas, but common ways in which to access the information. Okay, so again, I am not saying that all insectoids are negative by any means, but this is the frequency signature we're looking at. So, you know, scan yourself, scan your life, think about, is this type of stuff affecting you? And when you work to combat these issues or find some new agreement, a way of coming to a common ground, see if you can think like them, process like them when it comes to the solution that you're looking for, because they don't have a human approach, right? So our way of understanding them is to effort, if we can, to see how they would approach it and why, what's happening, okay? So anyways, I hope you guys have a wonderful Halloween. I love to connect with you, hear your comments. If you want to do one-on-one sessions with me, worldpeaceprojects.global. You can also access the brand new Psychic Protection course. It's now an e-course on sale at worldpeaceprojects.com. I have now reduced all e-courses. Everything's dropped to $100 or under, which is a fantastic price because some of them are like 15 hours worth of really thorough content that one day I'll pick apart and sell videos just on an individual class. But anyway, if you want a killer deal on a ton of metaphysical information and training, check out my e-courses at worldpeaceprojects.com. I would love to see you soon. Hope you're well. Bye.